Hello, everyone, and welcome to our NCJ webinar kicking off the Abortion Access for All Digital Lobby Day. I'm Sheila Katz, CEO of the National Council of Jewish Women, and I use she, her pronouns. For over 125 years, NCJW has boldly imagined a world where every person can make their own decisions about their body, health, and future. As people of faith, we advocate for abortion rights and access for all because of our religion and moral values, not in spite of them. We believe in compassion and dignity and are committed to ensuring equity and justice for the most marginalized members of our society, particularly for Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities, young people, low-income people, people living with disabilities, rural communities, immigrants, and LGBTQ individuals. We value every individual as a moral agent free to make personal choices about their reproductive health based on their own circumstances, beliefs, and conscience without political interference. And we reject efforts to impose a single religious viewpoint on all, and we reject efforts to weaponize religious liberty to block access to care. With 58 sections and over 180,000 dedicated advocates across the country, the National Council of Jewish Women works with all levels of government to secure the constitutional right to abortion and to ensure that all can access this time-sensitive essential health care. So today, we are so proud to come together with each of you in partnership with All Above All and the Act for Women campaign, as well as 27 organizational sponsors, to urge Congress to support two federal bills to advance reproductive freedom. First, the Women's Health Protection Act, or WIPA. Second, the Equal Access to Insurance Coverage in Health Insurance, or EACH Women Act. So we're gonna begin this kickoff program for the next hour, learning about both pieces of legislation and how to do digital lobbying, followed by a social media blitz from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern Time, where we will take what we've learned and let our members of Congress and our communities know where we stand. Then we'll take action by calling, emailing, and virtually visiting with our lawmakers and our staff. This Digital Lobby Day shows that our advocacy in pursuit of our fundamental rights never stops, even while we're sheltering at home. During this COVID-19 pandemic, attempts to classify abortion as non-essential, combined with existing medically unnecessary laws mandating in-person clinic visits and prohibiting medication abortion via telemedicine, have endangered the health and well-being of pregnant people, put providers at risk, and undermined public health efforts. So let's be clear. Abortion is a safe, essential component of healthcare and a basic human right. And as the Supreme Court recognized nearly 50 years ago in Roe v. Wade and has affirmed time and time again, it's your constitutional right to have an abortion, regardless of who you are, how much money you make, or where you live. Together, the Women's Health Protection Act and the Each Woman Act would bring us closer to a world where these rights are not just available in theory, but where everyone actually has unencumbered access to affordable abortion services. In this world, patients and providers would be freed from the over 450 laws restricting access to reproductive health care. What's more, the Hyde Amendment and related coverage bans that perpetuate systemic racism would no longer push abortion care out of reach for those struggling financially and for those who are most vulnerable among us. We're so incredibly grateful to be joined in this work by our amazing co-sponsors whose logos you can see here. I'll pause for a moment as you take in the collective power and breadth of these groups. Be sure to check out their social media feeds, be sure to share their posts, and tag them in your own posts throughout the day to amplify the impact of our Digital Lobby Day. Please also use the hashtag #AbortionAccess4all. So abortion access for all, with 4 being the number 4, when sharing or tweeting. We're gonna get this program started in a moment, and I'm thrilled to be your MC throughout the program. But first, just a few housekeeping rules. Just know that your mics and your cameras, your mics are muted and your cameras are turned off in order to keep the focus on our speakers. You can feel free to write questions in the chat box as we go, or hold on to them, until a bit later. Please write in the chat or email us at action@ncjw.org if you're experiencing any kinds of technical issues. And we are live captioning this, so if you'd like to access the closed captioned option, there's a button on your screen that either says CC or closed captioning, and you just need to click it to turn on the captioning. And finally, know that we are recording the webinar and we'll upload it to NCJW's website afterwards in case someone you know isn't here and you want to share this with them. It is now my pleasure to introduce Congresswoman Judy Chu, who became the first Chinese American woman in Congress when she was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives in July 2009. She represented the 27th Congressional District, which includes Pasadena and the West San Gabriel Valley of Southern California. Representative Chu currently serves on the powerful House Ways and Means Committee, which has jurisdiction over legislation pertaining to taxes, revenues, Social Security, and Medicare. In that committee, Representative Chu is a member of the subcommittees on health, giving her oversight over healthcare reform and crucial safety net programs, worker and family support, and oversight. She also serves on the House Small Business Committee, which has oversight over the Small Business Administration and is the chair of the Small Business Oversight Subcommittee. Notably, Representative Chu is the chair of the Pro-Choice Caucus's Contraception and Family Planning Task Force and the lead sponsor of the Women's Health Protection Act in the House of Representatives. Personally, I just want to say what a pleasure it is to work with Representative Chu, a true advocate for equity and justice. We thank you for introducing the No Ban Act to overturn the Muslim ban, which recently passed in the House. And we continue to be inspired by your outstanding leadership that has led WIPA to reach historic levels of support in Congress. Please join me in welcoming Congresswoman Chu.
Well, I can't seem to turn on my video, but, oh, okay. Okay. Thank you so much, Sheila. And yes, I'm Congressmember Judy Chu from California's 27th District. I thank you so much, National Council of Jewish Women, for inviting me to be part of the Abortion Access for All Digital Lobby Day. Although I wish we could be together for an in-person lobby day in Washington, D.C., I'm so thrilled that you're organizing events like this to help us keep up our fight for reproductive rights. I know I'm not alone when I say that following the confirmation of Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court, I was prepared for the worst in the June medical decision. But instead, I was overjoyed when the Supreme Court struck down Louisiana's unconstitutional anti-choice law. The June medical decision was a huge victory, but a closer look at the ruling shows that the battle is far from over. Roe versus Wade and a woman's right to choose are still very much in danger. You see, Chief Justice John Roberts was the fifth vote in striking down Louisiana's law, but only, he said, because the case was nearly identical to one that they ruled on 4 years earlier. In that case, the Whole Woman's Health versus Hellerstedt, the court rightly ruled that restrictions on a woman's ability to access abortion care, like unnecessary hospital admitting privileges for abortion providers, are an undue violation of her rights. In his opinion in June Medical, Roberts essentially said that he did not agree with the ruling in Whole Woman's Health, but he was compelled to uphold precedent. In other words, he was saying, come back with a different case and we may be able to strike down Roe versus Wade. And this challenge is absolutely coming as Republican state legislatures continue to look for new ways to chip away at women's reproductive rights. If they cannot completely ban abortions, then they will try to make abortions impossible to access. And this is happening right now. Currently, there are hundreds of cases in the pipeline that involve curbing access to abortion, and anti-choice extremists have been working for years on a strategy that will bring one of these cases before the Supreme Court in the near future. For example, there is a case from Texas which involves the state requirement of burial or cremation of fetal tissue. And there is a case from Arkansas, which is a state prohibition on D&E procedures, which is the safest and most common abortion procedures in the second trimester. There are cases challenging state laws on medically unnecessary waiting periods, cases fighting back against attempts to defund abortion providers like Planned Parenthood, and cases that question the constitutionality of requirements for ultrasounds before a woman receives an abortion. And new state laws that put onerous and medically unnecessary restrictions on abortion access are continuing to pop up, with over 450 laws passed since 2011. It's clear that this issue is not going away. And then there are the more comprehensive abortion bans from Ohio, Kentucky, Utah, Georgia, and Alabama, all making their way through the courts. These bans either completely ban abortion outright or put arbitrary restrictions that prohibit abortions after just 6 weeks before many women even know that they're pregnant. Anti-choice extremists are pushing the limits of what the courts will deem acceptable. Their goal is to make sure that even if Roe versus Wade is not overturned, they will make sure that the right to an abortion has been eroded in so many states that abortion is effectively out of reach for most American women. That's why it's not enough to wait for the court to affirm or deny our rights. Instead, we must take action to enshrine our rights in law so that they are guaranteed for everyone. And that's why we need my bill, H.R. 2975, the Women's Health Protection Act, or WIPA. WIPA would put a stop to these state-based attacks and enshrine the protections of Roe into law by ensuring that providers have the right to provide and patients have the right to receive abortion care that is free of medically unnecessary restrictions. The Women's Health Protection Act will guarantee that no matter where someone lives, no matter their zip code, abortion access is a right for all. Abortion is healthcare, plain and simple, and we must protect women's right to access the healthcare services that are right for her and her family. The good news is WIPA is popular. With 216 co-sponsors, this is the most supported pro-choice bill in Congress. And we've already had a hearing on it in the Energy and Commerce Committee, which is a necessary first step to bring it to the floor. But the Supreme Court's decision this summer made it clear that we cannot risk waiting. Another challenge to Roe is coming, and we cannot guarantee the same result. So instead, it's time we take matters into our own hands and pass the Women's Health Protection Act so we can protect our rights once and for all. And it's not just WIPA. We have the most pro-choice Congress in history, which means that it's also time to tackle other long-standing policies, such as repealing the Hyde Amendment, which primarily serves to deny abortion access to low-income women, especially women of color. It's time that we tear down these restrictions that make healthcare dependent on where you were born or how much money you have. It's time to repeal the Hyde Amendment once and for all, pass the Women's Health Protection Act, and invest in our public health systems to ensure that everyone has access to contraception and comprehensive sex education. This is our moment, and with your help, we can get it done. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Representative Chu. We're so happy for you to be here, and we're just incredibly grateful for you introducing this bill and for all the work you've done to make it the most popular pro-choice legislation that's been out there. You know, we are going to do everything we can to be lobbying your peers, and maybe even some people are going to be calling you to make sure that we're able to do our part to push this through. So thank you so much for being here and giving us that important background. Your continued championship of women, children, and families is notable and something that we hold really dear to have you as a partner. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'm so honored to welcome Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky, who was elected to represent Illinois' 9th Congressional District in 1998 after serving for 8 years in the Illinois State Assembly. She is in her 11th term. Representative Schakowsky serves in the House Democratic leadership as a senior chief deputy whip. She is a member of the House Democratic Steering and Policy Committee, House Budget Committee, as well as the House Energy and Commerce Committee, where she serves as chair of the Consumer Protection and Commerce Subcommittee, and as a member of the Environment and Oversight and Investigation Subcommittees. A leading advocate for women's issues in Congress, Representative Schakowsky has long been involved in the fight to protect reproductive freedom. She continues her work to prevent violence against immigrant women, achieve economic parity, and establish transitional housing for women and children who are victims of abuse. Representative Schakowsky is the sponsor of the International Violence Against Women Act, which would make the safety of women and girls around the world a long overdue U.S. foreign policy priority. And just last month, she introduced the Abortion is Healthcare Everywhere Act, the first ever legislation to repeal the Helms Amendment, a racist policy that bans the use of any U.S. foreign assistance funds for abortion services. As chair of the Congressional Pro-Choice Caucus Providers and Clinics Task Force, she is also the lead sponsor of the Each Women Act alongside the caucus's co-chairs, Congresswoman Barbara Lee and Diane DeGette. And importantly, we're thrilled that Representative Schakowsky is an NCJW Life member. Representative Schakowsky, thank you so much for being here with us today. The floor is yours.
Can you hear me now? Okay, great. Sheila, thank you so much. I am a life member of the National Council of Jewish Women. I am so proud to be that, and I have for decades been proud to be part of it. But seeing these young women taking charge just warms my heart. I am really thrilled to be with you today. And so I do want to talk to you about the Hyde Amendment and the Helms Amendment, but I do want to say passing Judy Chu's bill and codifying that Roe v. Wade is not only a decision of the court, but it is a ruling of the Congress of the United States is very important. And I'm so proud to be a co-sponsor of her bill as well. And I also want to say that these attacks on women are part and parcel of the racial justice agenda that we have, the civil rights agenda that we have, and the fact that women are stepping up right now, and there's a larger mobilization than we have seen in a long time, means that anything is possible. Although elections really matter. That's all I really say about that. So in 1973, that's when, 1976, 3 years after Roe v. Wade became the law of the land, Henry Hyde, who's from Illinois, like I am, I served with him before he passed away in the House of Representatives, denied abortion care to low-income, vulnerable women who get their health care, their health insurance through Medicaid. So it was clearly aimed at not only low-income, but primarily women of color, a racist piece of legislation and amendment. But since then, today, over 7 million women enrolled in Medicaid live in states that prohibit even state Medicaid programs to be able to cover abortion services. And what we've seen also is the expansion of Hyde year after year after year. And today, Hyde restricts abortion coverage to Medicare and the Child Health Insurance Program, the CHIP program, can't get it. Federal employees and their dependents. Military personnel and their dependents. Peace Corps volunteers. None of these people can access through the federal government help to get an abortion. Native Americans who rely on the Indian Health Service. Women in federal prison and detention centers, including those who are in detention because of immigration. Women who receive health from community health centers. Survivors of human trafficking, not eligible for federal support for an abortion. And all low-income women in the District of Columbia. So they have expanded, the Republicans, the anti-choice forces have expanded and expanded Hyde. And it is absolutely time for us to reassert not only our constitutional right to abortion, it is still the law of the land, but then also to pass Judy Chu's bill and to get rid of Hyde altogether. Now this is, I would say it's about 10 years ago that a group of incredibly fierce and wonderful young women, mostly women of color, came and said, what's with this Hyde Amendment? Why are you allowing that to be there? I said, you are absolutely right. The time is ripe for a campaign to get rid of Hyde. So we introduced the legislation, the Each Woman Act, which would do just that. That in 2015, our fight was still kind of a lonely one. And while Judy Chu has the most co-sponsors of the bill, I am proud to say that we have over 180 co-sponsors now of the legislation to get rid of Hyde, the Each Woman Act. And we do have, as Judy said, a pro-choice Democratic caucus in the House of Representatives. But it is also true that we have a pro-choice nation. If you ask Americans whether they think it is fair that women should be denied full access to health care because of their insurance status, that is because they're insured by Medicaid, because of their address, because of any of these outside qualifications, Americans say everyone should have access to these rights. And so we now are, ready, absolutely ready to move forward. And I want to tell you something. I think that the days of the anti-choice power, and they still dominate in the Senate, and they still dominate in the White House, are coming to a close. It is really up to us to make sure that the change is at hand, doing the organizing on this legislation, but also to make sure that every single person gets out to vote. So I think this is our moment. This is our time, and the moment for organizing. And the one more thing I want to say about organizing, we can't do it without you. It is absolutely essential, the work that you're going to be doing starting right today, and the lobbying efforts that you're going to be doing are as critical as anything that we do ourselves in the Congress. It is a partnership that can't be broken. Now, the other thing I wanted to tell you was when Roe was passed in 1973, Senator Jesse Helms stepped forward to say, well, we certainly don't want that to mean that money that we give in foreign aid, and he was a chair of the Foreign Relations Committee in the Senate, none of that money should go to women around the world. And let's face it, we're talking mostly about lower income, Black and brown women around the world They should not be able to access, with our money, any kind of abortion services. And what the law at the time said was very clear that abortion could not be used as a method of birth control. But since then, it has been interpreted as abolishing all access to abortion around the world. And that, combined with the global gag rule, which goes even further, that women can't be told about their options, even to go somewhere else, has meant that US dollars have really been penalizing and oppressing women all over the globe. And so last month I introduced the Abortion is Healthcare Everywhere Act. And I'm so proud to have a number of wonderful women in the House of Representatives, Democrats, who are co-sponsors. It is 7816, and it's the first ever bill to repeal the Helms Amendment. Not a widely known act, and yet doing enormous damage around the globe. And as I said, it was passed in 1973 and has been on the books ever since. And so I think that if you can add that to your agenda, because it is the international version of the Hyde Amendment. And both are aimed at, of course, at women, mainly low-income women, women of color. So we have an obligation, I believe, to deal on that level too, and be in solidarity with our sisters around the globe. Let me see if my staff wanted me to say anything else. Oh, my staff put in, enough is enough. And I'm going to go along with that as well. We've had it. And, you know, we have had to live under these excruciating rules. As Judy pointed out, over 400 pieces of legislation at state legislative levels, which means we have to vote up and down the ticket, state legislative levels that make it difficult or even impossible for women to access abortion services. So I just want to thank you once again, National Council of Jewish Women, and I am so proud of the work that you're doing, and I yield back.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman Schakowsky, for joining us today, and of course for your longstanding leadership in the fight to end these discriminatory coverage bans. You know, I read an amazing op-ed that you wrote recently with other members of Congress, with Representatives Lee, Presley, and Ocasio-Cortez around women of color and allies leading the way in Congress and in communities and state houses across the country. And with that, the Hyde Amendment's days are numbered. And that's really the spirit in which we're hoping to go into this. And we're looking forward to being a part of that fight with you. So thank you again for joining us and all of our partners here today. It's good to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So now we're going to hear more about these critical bills from experts and our partners at All Above All and the Acts for Women campaign. We're proud to partner with these coalitions today and every day as we work together to ensure abortion access for all. So I'm going to give you the bios of our two speakers coming up. We're going to hear from Daniela first. So Daniela Ochoa Diaz is the Federal Strategies Manager at All Above All. She's going to provide background and talking points on the Each Woman Act, demystify the appropriations process, which is not easy to do, but she does well, and explain the ask for lawmakers. So this is, you know, everyone's going to put their thinking caps on here and really take out your pen and paper if you've got it, because this is going to be the part that really prepares you for the next section of taking action. Daniela works with coalition partners and the Hill to advance the Each Woman Act and defend against the expansion of abortion coverage bans. Daniela joined the ALL team with a scope of experiences that encompass a strong knowledge of the abortion care and provider community through her work with the Allentown Women's Center, the National Abortion Federation, and most recently as the Assistant Director of Public Policy with Physicians for Reproductive Health. Prior to entering the reproductive health rights and justice space, Daniela worked on issues of integrity, governance, corruption, and whistleblower protection via the Organization of Economic Development and Cooperation. Daniela graduated from Lafayette College, where she studied international affairs and earned a master from the American University of Paris. And after we hear from her, I'm just going to do this introduction so we flow in the content. We're going to hear from Jackie Blank, who will be offering an issue briefing on the Women's Health Protection Act, WIPA. And as a manager of the Act for Women's campaign, Jackie leads the Center for Reproductive Rights effort to support WIPA, which again is the federal legislation to protect the right to access abortion free from medically unnecessary restrictions and bans. In this role, Jackie organizes coalition activities and works with Congress. Jackie also serves as federal legislative strategist and works on additional proactive abortion legislation on behalf of the center. Jackie joined the center from the National Abortion Federation, where she lobbied on behalf of abortion providers as federal policy director. Previously, she advocated for foreign policy issues in Congress as the Associate Director of Government Affairs for J Street in Washington, D.C. Jackie's work in policy began in the office of Congressman Jerry Nadler of New York City as his community liaison, and she holds a Bachelor of Arts from Colgate University in Middle Eastern and Islamic Civilization Studies and Religion, and a master's degree in international relations from the University of Glasgow. So clearly, we've got two experts joining us today to show us the way. Daniela, I'm thrilled. Thank you again for being here, and we're excited to learn from you right now.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me today. It's a pleasure to be here. I could not have agreed more with Congresswoman Schakowsky's overview of the Each Woman Act, and I'm excited to do an overview of both the Each Woman Act as well as parts of the appropriation process. But before we get started, I do want to share with you all a little bit of what is All Above All. And All Above All is a campaign that seeks to ensure abortion coverage so that abortion is affordable and accessible to all, not just some. The organization and the campaign ultimately work to advance proactive policy at the local, state, and federal level. As we progress to the next slide, you'll be able to see the original quote of Henry Hyde, and Congresswoman Schakowsky addressed this quite a bit. But as you can see from this quote, Henry Hyde reminds us of the true intentions of this policy. And with the political environment and the environment that we've seen transpire this year, it's important to mention that the intent of this policy was for it to be discriminatory. We know that this disproportionately impacts Black, Latinx, Indigenous, and other communities of color, perpetuating systems of oppression as well as cycles of poverty and economic inequality. So the Hyde Amendment lives as a rider, as Congresswoman Schakowsky explained, that is added to bills. The rider, in essence, is something that amends a policy and is often added to must-pass bills. The first time we saw the Hyde rider be included in a bill was in 1976 in the Labor, Health, and Human Services Bill. The reason why we place such strong focus on labor HHS, as Congresswoman Schakowsky addressed, it's because this ban lives within Medicaid, and Medicaid funding is funded via labor HHS. So I am now going to enter a bit of a appropriations process overview. It's going to be a very high level explainer of basically the progression of the bill as it advances from its entrance into the Labor HHS subcommittee, which is a subcommittee of the Appropriations Full Committee, and how it gets to a floor vote. So the appropriations process is one that takes place every year, and it's how the government decides to spend its money. In the Labor HHS appropriations bill is where the restriction on Medicaid lives. Currently, because the House of Representatives is the only chamber with a pro-choice majority, that is where the majority of our appropriations work has been focused. So the bill starts in the Labor HHS subcommittee. This is an area where the bill gets introduced, members make statements on the bill, and at times we find minimal amendments take place in the subcommittee. From there, the bill enters the Appropriations full committee. It sees a markup process where a series of amendments are offered by both parties to the bill. This is an area where members will make statements about issues that are important for them pertaining to the bill, and traditionally this is a process that takes quite a long time. The Rules Committee is a very wonky space. It is a place where all of the amendments to the bill are reviewed, the amendments that were added during the full committee markup process. And the Rules Committee can rule these amendments in and out of order. If ruled out of order, what this traditionally means is that the amendment will not continue onto a floor vote when the bill is sent to the floor for a vote, which is the traditional final step of the process. There's no magical matrix about how the Rule Committee makes the decision of what is in and out of order, but what is important to know is that it can be based on whether an amendment can win on a floor vote or isn't a harmful amendment to lose on a floor vote. In the next slide, you'll see the 2020 appropriations overview process as it took place this year, with some of the dates and timings so that you have an idea of what took place when. Because we all have different learning styles, I thought it would be helpful to also have a flow chart. And one of the things that I want to highlight in this specific slide is the piece in the Rules Committee where we saw Congresswoman Presley offer an amendment to remove Hyde from labor HHS in the Rules Committee process, which we saw this year be ruled out of order. So progressing from there, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Each Woman Act, which I'm going to reiterate aspects of what we heard so wonderfully put by Congresswoman Schakowsky. So the Equal Access to Abortion Coverage in Health Insurance Act, the Each Woman Act, as she stated in the House, has currently over 180 co-sponsors. The House bill number is 1692 and in the Senate is 758. It was first introduced in July of 2015, and we were fortunate to have a bicameral introduction for the first time in March of 2019. So the bill ends coverage bans like the Hyde Amendment, denying abortion coverage to those enrolled in federal health programs, and prohibits political interference in private insurance coverage of abortion at all levels of the government. In today's asks, when you guys are in the process of doing incredible advocacy, it's important to remember that the Hyde Amendment, that the Each Woman Act, and my apologies, in the asks explained, if you're going to meet with somebody who is already a congressperson who's already co-sponsoring the bill, we ask that you thank them, and we ask that you ask them to eliminate the Hyde Amendment or similar coverage bans in future appropriations bills. If they are not yet an each co-sponsor, the Abortion Access for All Toolkit has an incredible roster of our strong talking points, both out of WIPA as well as of the Each Woman Act, for you to be able to collectively put together your ask. So we're really grateful that you're doing this today. One of the things that is important to note is the legacy of the Hyde Amendment. As Congresswoman Schakowsky mentioned for us today, the Hyde Amendment rider not only lives in Labor, Health, and Human Services appropriation bill, but it also lives in other bills blocking federal funds to cover abortion for the groups of folks listed above. And as she covered, it includes federal employees and dependents, Peace Corps volunteers, Native Americans, women in federal prisons and detention centers, military service women, veterans and their dependents, as well as low-income folks in the District of Columbia. And with that, I want to express an immense amount of gratitude for the advocacy that you're bringing forth today. And I'm going to pass the mic to Sheila.
Thank you so much, Daniela. That you just explained so much in such a crisp, clear, concise way. We're incredibly grateful you're hired for all of our future webinars. But we hope you all got that as you're starting to think about lobbying and preparing. We're going to jump right into our next speaker with Jackie to learn more about WIPA, and then we're going to start taking action. So we hope you're getting excited. So Jackie, I think if you turn your video on, you should be able to join right now, and we'll turn it to you.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for having me. Daniela is a tough act to follow. The appropriations process is incredibly confusing. So even I appreciated hearing that concise, but still very thorough explainer. I am so excited to be here. Like Sheila mentioned, I am the campaign manager for the Act for Women campaign. That campaign is a coalition of over 100 organizations that support the Women's Health Protection Act. Those organizations are national organizations, including NCJW. It also includes state and local level organizations, other faith groups, individual clinics, reproductive justice organizations, litigation organizations, really running the full gamut of folks who are involved in the reproductive health, rights, and justice sphere. And we are so grateful for the work that this entire coalition has done, because without all of that organizing work, we would not be at the record number of co-sponsors that we have, which Congresswoman Judy Chu mentioned earlier. I apologize if what I'm about to say is pretty similar to what Congresswoman Judy Chu said earlier, but she was so thorough, stole a couple of my talking points, but hopefully hearing it again will be helpful. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about how the Women's Health Protection Act works and why it's so important. So like we heard earlier, the Women's Health Protection Act creates an affirmative right for providers to provide care to patients, and a derivative right for patients to receive that care from providers free from medically unnecessary bans and restrictions. So we have seen over the last couple of years, and certainly a ramp up in the last 2 or 3 years, I would say, of restrictions and bans that treat abortion care differently from all other types of medical care. And so in an attempt at justification, you'll hear anti-abortion politicians say that these restrictions are needed for the patient's health care, for general more positive health outcomes, and they'll claim that abortion is incredibly unsafe. This is all completely untrue, and I think it demonstrated by the fact that comparable types of medical care, we frequently refer to colonoscopies and dental care as similar levels of complication in the provision of that care, are actually less or not as safe as abortion care, and none of those similar types of medical care are restricted in the same way that abortion care is. And so it is quite clear that these restrictions are solely intended to make abortion more difficult to access. And so the Women's Health Protection Act lists out a number of the different types of restrictions that we have seen. These include bans, gestational bans, procedure bans, reason bans, mandatory waiting periods, mandatory bias counseling, admitting privileges laws. All of these, again, under the guise of making abortion care more safe, do not make abortion care more safe. All they do is make abortion care more difficult to access. And of course, they have a compound effect on individuals who live in medically underserved areas, people with low incomes, LGBTQ individuals, younger individuals, people with disabilities, Black and brown women. And so it's incredibly important that we acknowledge that not only are these restrictions bad, but they have an extra effect on certain communities, which of course is the intent of those people behind it. And so in addition to having this list of certain types of restrictions, the bill also has a sort of catch-all section, acknowledging that the other side has gotten creative in the last couple of years. We want to just acknowledge that if there is another way for them to try and put abortion care out of reach, we've built this sort of catch-all system so that if there are attempts to restrict abortion care in ways that cannot be proven to be medically benefiting the patients, that those restrictions would not be allowed under the Women's Health Protection Act. So why do we need WIPA. You know, we hear a lot about how Roe v. Wade is the law of the land, and thankfully the Louisiana admitting privileges case was just struck down in June Medical Services versus versus Russo. And, you know, I think what Congresswoman Chu said is really important to remember, that this case struck down one law in one state. And did so very narrowly. And Chief Justice Roberts really admitted that if any other case had come to the Supreme Court, he would have basically been ready to uphold it. And so historically, these different types of restrictions have been struck down in a sort of whack-a-mole sort of way. You know, litigating groups will sue in one state, and they have to keep filing different types of lawsuits for the different types of restrictions. In a way that is really harmful for patients, creates a lot of confusion, is really harmful for providers who really should be spending their time providing care and not, you know, filing lawsuits. And so the idea behind the Women's Health Protection Act is to create a federal standard so that it's not as confusing for each individual restriction to have to be brought up against the Roe versus Wade standard. And so I think it's important for us to celebrate the victory in June Medical Services for Louisiana. But the day after the decision, there was no more expanded access than there was the day before the decision, right? Louisiana access is pretty much flat at this point, still decimated from years and years of state legislators really trying quite hard to remove access. And in the last couple of weeks, even since that decision, we've seen a number of other legal challenges. The state of Georgia has appealed a decision striking down a 6-week ban. There are a number of cases popping up. We just got, unfortunately, a not great decision in an Arkansas case that we're continuing to pursue. And so I think it's really important to remember that even though Roe v. Wade is the law of the land, it is more a right in theory than a right in practice. And so the hope of the Women's Health Protection Act is to make it so that the right can actually be exercised by everyone everywhere. So the bill numbers are 2975 in the House and 1645 in the Senate. Like Congresswoman Judy Chu mentioned, we have 216 co-sponsors in the House. This is huge. And we have 43 in the Senate, which is also a really incredible number. And the hearing that was referred to earlier was actually the first proactive hearing on abortion care in over 20 years in the House. And it was a really momentous occasion, and I think really demonstrative of the fact that the House has come a really long way, that the pro-choice majority that we have is really ready to do the type of work necessary to move legislation forward. But that being said, just a hearing is not enough. And so what you'll see in your materials is about what the ask is for today, which I'm going to explain a little bit. Of course, if someone is not a co-sponsor of the bill, we would like them to become a co-sponsor of the bill. But the ask if someone is already a co-sponsor is for them to call for a vote for the bill to be brought to the floor. So just a little bit of context, because this is actually not how legislation would be considered normally. You wouldn't normally have a hearing and then have the bill brought directly to the floor. But you know, the times that we're in have completely changed how everything operates, and Congress is no exception. I think the dysfunction in Washington, D.C. is well understood by everyone who's on this call. And so typically what would happen after a hearing in the subcommittee would be to have a markup in the subcommittee when, you know, members could have the opportunity to draft amendments. And then there would be a markup in the full committee, and then it would go to the floor. Again, Congress is not operating the way it normally does. Votes are taking a lot longer because members have to socially distance. Hearings are, you know, rightfully being reserved for the COVID crisis. And so, you know, we are hoping, given these extenuating circumstances and the fact that, you know, this movement really can't wait, that there will be an opportunity to bring the vote to the floor this year. It is certainly a long shot. I don't want to promise that our asks will make that happen, but I think it's really important that we continue to ask for it, because as someone mentioned in the chat or the questions earlier, you know, the strategy behind WIPA and EACH is not just for this Congress. These are medium, long-term strategies. We have to continue to build the type of coalition in Congress that it will take to get these bills across the finish line. And so, you know, continuing to keep pressure up is going to be incredibly important to making sure that we can, you know, cross that 218 number in the House next Congress, to make sure that we can get this bill passed in the House, and hopefully we'll be able to do the same in the Senate. So I'm happy to turn it back to Sheila, and then of course answer any questions if folks have them.
Great. Thank you so much, Jackie. And thank you again, Daniela. I think we're ready to start taking some action. So at least I feel prepared after the content that we got from all our great speakers. I hope you all feel the same way. So here's how this is going to work now. We'll post it in the chat. I'm pointing, thinking that the chat is over where you're seeing. We have a toolkit that has all the information that you'll need, talking points, asked for lawmakers, etc. And the resource also contains a sample script and an appendix with contact information for your members of Congress. If you aren't sure who your senators and representatives are, no worries. There's a great website that can help with that. I wish I came up with it. It is whoismyrepresentative.com. You could just type that on into your browser and it will tell you who your representative is, and a picture should come up. If you click on their picture, you'll be able to find the number that you can call. And when you reach the office, you can use the script that will add onto the screen to advocate for WIPA and the Each Woman Act. And you're more than welcome, of course, to customize the language. You don't have to read right off of it, but sometimes people like to have a script when they're going into this. You could share a story, you could add more to it, and you could share how your loved ones are impacted by this or how your community is impacted by this. Just remember that congressional offices log incoming calls. So do not be discouraged to leave a message if nobody is there, given the current situation. And we recommend that you call both of your senators and your representative for maximum impact. And so basically what we're going to do right now is, while we're all on the call, we're going to pause. We'll each get our phones ready, and we're going to allot just a few minutes for you to make a phone call. We'll play some background music here, which you can lower down if it's too loud while you're making your phone calls. And then we're going to regroup here so we could share the rest of the action steps to take over the next hour. So we're going to give you about 3 to 4 minutes. Woo, pressure. Everyone, I was able to get a phone call in. I left a voicemail. I hope everybody is either still on the phone or got some calls in. Thank you for taking the time to reach out to your lawmakers. The level of engagement is clear evidence of just how easy it is to make your voice heard and to advocate for reproductive health rights and justice. And so we do encourage you to share any positive responses to your phone calls right in the chat. Unfortunately, even if you weren't able to make a call or speak to a congressional staffer just now, you'll have plenty of opportunities to take action throughout our digital lobby day. So we're gonna actually start our social media blitz. And this is gonna be time that you could post on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or your social media platform of choice to support WIPA and the Each Woman Act. And so here are some tips and tricks for engaging and advocating on social media. Our toolkit for advocates, which you should have at this point, contains some sample posts that you can use. You can literally just copy and paste the samples directly. You can make edits or adjustments. There's a folder of graphics that you can use for the social media. And you can click the links. I think it just says graphics for media, and download from the Google Drive folder to add them in and attach them to your post. The toolkit also includes social media handles for NCJW, All Above All, and all of the amazing co-sponsors. Especially if you come here from another organization, we hope that you'll tag your organization with pride in your posts. And you can also tag your elected officials. Their Twitter handles are in the toolkit's appendix. Show some love to the members of Congress who are already supporting the bills, and urge those who aren't to get on board. This is a great way to show people that we actually care about this, that people are rallying about it, and it helps move it forward. Additionally, make sure to use the hashtag. You can see it in the sample post, hashtag abortion access for all, to all of your posts. There's also specific hashtags for both of the bills that we were talking about. So hashtag act for women is used for the WIPA posts, and hashtag be bold and hide, HYDE, is for the Each Woman Act. And if you're still not sure what to say, or you want to do more, you can share posts from any of the partner organizations that are here who are going to start to post now. And I guess just, I already made a phone call. So to demonstrate how easy this is, I'm just going to go onto Twitter right now. I'm just at Sheila Katz 1. And I am going to type, today I'm virtually lobbying for the Women's Health Protection Act and Each Woman Act to ensure everyone can access abortion care, exclamation point. Let's see if we have room. Thanks to Rep. Judy Chu and Rep. Jan Schakowsky for joining us to prep us for lobbying. Here we go. I'm gonna @ NCJW, @ all above all, hashtag abortion access for all. And then I got the images ready and tweet. Look at that, my tweet was sent. All good, you can't really see it on there. But we hope you'll all start tweeting and getting connected to the organization who's tweeting. So far, I've already got some people liking my posts. Look at that, how quickly these things work. So really, this is all the time we have for our opening program. I really want to thank Representatives Chu and Schakowsky, and to Daniela and to Jackie for sharing their time, expertise, and passion for reproductive health rights and justice with all of us today. And before we close out, I just want to review the schedule for the rest of the day for folks who are taking part of it. The social media blitz is now, please just start going. And it will conclude around 2 o'clock. So we're trying to give folks about an hour, 2 o'clock Eastern, about an hour to be active on social media. Use the hashtags to see who else is tweeting, lift up their voices, maybe follow them so we can all be in this work together in the future. A lot of the NCJW advocates are starting their virtual lobby visits soon. If you're not in the network and have scheduled your own lobby visits, that's amazing, and we're so excited to hear how they go. You can also use this as inspiration to just create a lobby meeting. We give in the toolkit a sample email that you can send to set up a lobby meeting, to make sure you're talking to somebody from your Congress member's office in person, well, not in person, over Zoom, to make sure that you're advocating that way. And there's plenty of tips in the toolkit that you can look at, regardless of whether this is your first lobby visit ever or your 100th and you're a pro already. But we do hope to hear back from you about how those go. In addition, if you have time and want to go further, here are 4 ways that you could do that. Number 1 is you can email your lawmakers. Just take what we did on the phone, put it in an email and get it out. We'll put a link to NCJW's action alert in the chat in case you want to use that. We make it simple. You could log on to ncjw.org/act to sign our 2 petitions for all people of faith to call on Congress to pass WIPA and the Each Woman Act. You could check out our Rabbis for Repro campaign. If we've got any rabbis or clergy on the call, we invite you to check that out. We'll also include the link. And you can head to All Above All and Act for Women's websites for more resources and for more ways to engage. We'll also put the link right there. And especially if you're unfamiliar with these 2 fabulous organizations, please, please check out their website, like them on social media, and get connected to them. And as we close, I just want to say thank you again to our speakers, partners, and co-sponsors. None of this would have been possible without your support, and especially to the staff who helped put this together, in particular, Shannon Russell, thank you so much. And a huge thanks to all of you for choosing to spend your time to take action with us today. Together, the Women's Health Protection Act and the Each Woman Act will create a future where all can access the abortion services they need without cost barriers, delays, or burdensome limitations. And together, we can truly make that change happen to ensure abortion access for all. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I'll see you all in Twitterverse and on social media talking about this.